Business Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. on Saturday, the 28th of June to the early morning hours of Sunday, the 29th of June, depending on where you are. Looks like 1 a.m. Eastern. It's going to be the time for yours truly to appear on Coast to Coast AM, and this will focus largely around Putin and the question of World War III, and at the same time, Iraq, Syria, Iran, and other possible theaters of war. So please do tune in. I want to thank Richard Sirett. You should listen to this program, the Conspiracy Hour, which is on in the Zoomer Radio of Toronto every Sunday evening at 11 to midnight Eastern Time, often very interesting guests. And he will be, I think, the guest host on the Saturday night edition of the Coast to Coast AM. Now, back to this stuff. What does it mean for Barroso, right? The European meddlers, right? This when Victoria Nuland says blankety blank the EU, she's talking about Barroso and somehow the bungling, even as an imperialist. Barroso, he represents Weltmachtruine Portugal, right? The ruin of a world power. That mentality seems to live on in him. The Salazar fascism of Portugal. So Barroso has now, let's call him Bozo for short, but Bozo Barroso has decided that it's time to sign the deal with Ukraine, Moldova. Moldova is that piece of what used to be Romania, then it was transferred to the Soviets. It's the extreme southwest corner, I guess, of the Soviet Union. So Moldova, of course, like all the other nomenclatura oligarch states, became so-called independent. But at that point, then, a slice of that, the so-called Transdniester area, decided that they would resecede. It's just like West Virginia. We know all this, right? Just what West Virginia did to Virginia. Virginia left the Union. West Virginia left. Virginia went back to the Union. Same stuff with Moldova. And then, of course, Georgia, where we're familiar with the fascist phonetications of the tin pot demagogue Saakashvili, who almost got a world war going in 2008. You'll remember, Cheney wanted to bomb the southern end of the tunnel that Russia was using to send in reinforcements. Now, this is the economic association. The political part had already been signed. Political part says Ukraine must align itself with the foreign policy goals of the European Union. That means NATO. That is a figment, a feature of the Lisbon Treaty. So they've already come on board politically. Now economically. I don't know whether they've published the entire content. I rather doubt it, but we'll see in the coming days of what this association is. This is the one that Yanukovych said was not good enough. And I suspect Yanukovych is going to be revealed as a clairvoyant and a prophet, because you'll remember what this is. Double the price of gas, right? Natural gas. Go ahead and turn the pipeline system over to Chevron. Give the Black Earth region away to foreigners. Bring in Ruhrstahl and Ruhrkohle and let them take over the Donetsk, Donbass, and Krivoy Rog heavy industrial complex, right? Which was, I think I mentioned, when I was in grade school, I wrote a paper about the Donetsk, Donbass as one of, or perhaps the most heavily industrialized regions in the entire world at that time. So, David Ignatius, speaking for the CIA and the State Department on National Pentagon Radio, it points to the basic weakness of the Putin position. And, of course, it's true. It is a defensive position. It is not really seizing the initiative unless you look at it sort of tactically. Let me point out a very interesting talk by Sergei Glaziev. Glaziev, of course, someone that we like. We want to follow him. We brought up his proposals at the U.S.-Russia Forum. You'll remember that Wayne Murray of the State Department and the Pentagon said he hoped for the victory of Kudrin over Glaziev, and We also had the Nemtsov representative, the Union of Right-Wing Forces, Soyuz Pravich Sil, said that Glaziev was crazy and a communist, actually, also. Of course, he is a dirigist. He's like Alexander Hamilton. And we'll talk about an economic proposal in a minute. Glaziev says genocide is now being practiced by Poroshenko against the Donbass and the reintroduction of serfdom under the IMF and European Union conditionalities. The Troika, as we've known it in Greece and Spain and so forth. Glaziev points to an ideologue by the name of Liashko, Liashko, or something like that, depending on your transliteration system. Essentially, this is one of the leading Nazi ideologues. Glaziev points out that if Ukraine had kept a certain number of neutron bombs, they would have used them. They would have used the neutron bomb in Slavyansk, in Lugansk, and places like this. And remember, we have Timoshenko in a telephone conversation actually saying that the people in eastern Ukraine should be exterminated with nuclear war. Continuing with Glaziev, the U.S. is de facto at war with Russia. The time, however, is on the side of the Nazi forces. And he points out, as I have, that economically speaking, once these conditionalities are enacted, you can reckon with the collapse of the regime to some extent or other. But he points out then in Georgia, there was no collapse of the Saakashvili regime, and instead the regime simply morphed into something different. But you can see it's still on a full anti-Russian line. Time is not on the side of Russia, says Glaziev. This is a factor of pressure on Putin, because a lot of people believe this, and they may be right. He says the militarization goes like this. There is essentially a process of manufacturing Nazi cadre in the Ukraine. Right? It takes time to train them, to indoctrinate them, to give them military training. Right? This is done by right sector and so forth. In December, as the riots were at their height or approaching their height, 2,000 Nazis were available. A little bit later, it was 9 or 10,000 of these Nazis. By May, it's 50,000 Nazis available. By the summer, say July, August, 100,000 Nazis. By September, 200,000 Nazis. And by December, 500,000 indoctrinated Nazis with some kind of military training in Ukraine. That's the danger. Kharkov factories are working overtime. 200 tanks are now in use in the east, and that is a pretty serious situation. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Saturday, the 28th of June, overnight, 1 a.m. in the morning Eastern Time, and so forth. And I'll be on Coast to Coast AM. All right, so it's 100 years since the beginning of World War I. Glaziev is pointing to a build-up to a large war in Central Europe. We've got another guy, Yevgeny Fyodorov, who's telling us about attempts to create a color revolution inside Russia. Well, we've known that, right? That was McFaul. He failed. And Navalny, but also Limonov and Kasparov are that. But that's very limited. And maybe Russian society has defense mechanisms. The Eurogarchs and Euromedlers, they've just had their summit, right? One side of the summit is these attacks on Russia through Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. The other one, of course, the feud now between Cameron, who is the city of London, and the Eurogarch, Eurocrat federalist types around the Juncker as EU commish, and that will have to go down to the European Parliament. Our candidate was Tsipras. We have nothing to do with any of this, but we're happy to see oligarchs fighting among themselves, and the reason for that, of course, is lifeboat ethics in the ruling class. The Depression means that not every faction can survive. Therefore, they fight. Suffice it to say, the City of London can never leave Europe in any meaningful way, because without their ability to parasitize and sack and loot European production, they would be nowhere. This is also one of the points from Glaziev. He points out that the Russian central bank is essentially a tool of the U.S. Federal Reserve. It only issues rubles against dollar reserves. So he has taken aim at Nabiullina, the head of the Russian central bank, who is in there with Greff and Kudrin and others in the neoliberal side, right? And this is actually the fifth column in Russia, the pro-Western faction, but it's not pro-Western in any good way. It's pro-Western in the sense of pro-Wall Street. Let's call it that. Now, Putin has sent planes to Iraq. This is amazing. The U.S. has been stalling on F-16s that Maliki wanted because they say, oh, you're going to use them against the Kurds or somebody else, or you're going to give them to the Iranians. Putin has now arranged to send in some pretty formidable Russian planes. They're used, but they can be there in 2 to 3 days. And apparently the pilots are trained for them. You'll remember the Iraqi Air Force was destroyed, right? It had to flee into Iran in the first Gulf War of 1990 to 91. All right, so Putin is now asserting a Russian role in Iraq. The U.S. will go bonkers. Notice also that Syria, Assad, has been helping to stem the tide against ISIS by bombing them. They have bombed them quite effectively, both on the Syrian side of the border and on the Iraqi side of the border. But on the other hand, what we've got in Washington is still the hate Maliki hour. The reflex of demonization of some foreign figure is so tremendous that they just can't get away from it. They want Alawi, it's clear, but they think that by blaming their problems on Maliki, they can somehow solve them or continue. Notice that Obama is continuing to stall and offer token concessions to the warmongers, right? The drones being sent in against ISIS, that's typical Obama, and it's reprehensible, but it's, what's it going to be, drones or 5 divisions? You tell me. This is the debate in Washington right now. If you don't like that debate, you do something to change it. The Assad regime, of course, could be helped to destroy the bases of ISIS, but they don't want to do that because they've got this unfortunate, irrational hostility to Assad, even though the idea of supporting Assad got grudging acceptance by 1 or 2 participants on National Pentagon Radio this morning. When a guy called in, Sam called in to say, it's time to support Assad, you dolts. True. Ignatius is still holding on to the idea that the Arab Spring was a bottom-up revolution and real. Of course, was a color revolution imposed by CIA, MI6, NATO intelligence, Saudis, Qatar, and others. So, the extent of the involvement by the U.S. now are the drones, sure to create a backlash, the 500 troops on the ground, and now the demand for training facilities. This is interesting. The Washington Post has to admit that there has been the covert training facility in Jordan all along, but that now that's going to be increased. Now, the covert training facility is the one that we identified last week as being the training ground for ISIS. That's where ISIS comes from. So look at this. We're going to have a new wave of ISIS trained under the guise of fighting ISIS.